I'm Juan Francisco, and I'm a psychic medium. I'm here with you to explore your intuition, the supernatural, and self empowerment. This is Third Eyesight. Jeni Juranics is a medium, psychic, mentor, psychic investigator, and host of Spirit Call, the podcast. Jeni has been offering readings since 2016, and she's known for her down to earth and comforting approach to her practice. She uses her abilities to connect with spirit and taps into her clients' unique energies to bring specific messages and guidance to them. Jeni is about to embark on Transitions Tour 2025, a series of evenings of Jeni connecting to the spirit world for her audiences. We're chatting with Jeni today on Third Eyesight. Hey Jeni, I'm so excited to have you on Third Eyesight.
Hey Juan, thank you. It's so nice to meet you.
You too. And as I told you one on one, I had heard about you through the Mediumship Matters podcast by Hannah McIntyre, and I really resonated with your story. And I would love to talk to you about that more, as well as just your journey and more about you as a psychic medium. So let's start with this. Where are you based? And tell us about what you do.
Well, I'm in Ontario, Canada, small town in the country. I'm a country girl. I'm a psychic, a medium, tarot reader, numerologist. I also host a podcast called Spirit Call, and I'm co-host of another podcast called Third Eye Witness, which is a psychic investigation, missing persons, crime podcast with another medium from Australia, Rhiannon. And I've been doing this work for 10 years now. It's my passion, my purpose. You can also find me in front of large audiences and just really bringing the message of spirit, the validation, the comfort, the knowing that we do continue on into the afterlife. That's my purpose. That's my passion. So it's been an interesting journey, as you know, for yourself as well. But I'm happy to be here and speak about all things spirit. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, there's nothing ever wrong about speaking all things spirit. And I have to say, I've listened to your podcast, one of your podcasts, and I started listening to the episodes where you go into your own story and how you came to do the work that you do. And I do want to say that you have such an artful way of telling stories, and I'm like eating it up, and it's very vulnerable, and it's also so clear. I can picture everything that you're sharing with us in your podcast about your journey. And I would love to hit on a couple things in your journey. So, first and foremost, what would you say was your first spiritual awakening, or was the first moment you thought, oh, this is real? There is something else here that I can be in touch with?
hmm Well, you probably heard from one of my podcast episodes, one of the first episodes where I share about my out of body experience when I was 10. I don't know if you remember that part, but let me share it here. So,
Yes, please.
okay, so in grade school there was a camp that, once you hit grade 5, you knew you were going to get to go to Sunship Earth. It was this beautiful property, the lake, the forest, and it was a nature-based camp for a week. And I've always been very connected to nature and spent a lot of time outside as a kid. I think us mediums, us sensitive people, nature is really important, grounding and getting outside. And so, really excited to go. After the 5 days, I think that we were there. I It was the last day and we were heading we had just had breakfast in the pavilion, and there was this big hill that we had to walk up to go back to our cabins to get our bags and hop on the bus and go home. And as I was walking up this hill, kind of running, I suddenly had this kind of pulling experience where it was like my soul or my consciousness or my spirit, I don't know, I was only 10, was being pulled out of my body, and I could feel this bigger sense of something, right? And I remember it vividly for it being such a long time ago, but it was like I zoomed out and I could see down on myself running up the hill. And then I could see further and further out, and my friends running up the hill, and then the lake and the forest and the school bus up ahead. I had this bird's eye view, and it didn't last very long. It wasn't a long experience. And then I kind of snapped back into my body, and I think, looking back, I've had lots of little spiritual experiences before that, but I really do feel like that was the first big experience that kind of said, there's more than just your body, just, the material things around you, there's more. And I could sense that and feel that. And so it's something that's really stuck with me all these years. And I think about it actually quite often because things like that you don't forget. I'm sure you've had similar experiences. You just don't forget those things. So, yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah,
Nothing
that
has
is
happened like that since. But
interesting.
yeah,
Have you I want to go back, I want to ask you about that particular experience, but I want to ask you like coming to the present, has there been anything, or have you intentionally or proactively tried to, would it be called astral projection, or just have an out of body experience? And have you, how's that experience been for you to do it purposefully?
I think in yoga, I've had a lot of experiences, with breath work and meditation. I've had a lot of experiences like that since that I put myself in that position, right? To have that. But that one I think was it spontaneous, let's say. So, I'm not chasing that. I'm not looking for that. I think, now fast forward, I guess it would have been another 20 years after that, now I'm in this mediumship world of every day feels like we're we're leaving our bodies behind, right? When we do our readings and do our work. So I'm not chasing it, I'm not looking for it, but yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
if it comes to you, it
dreams.
comes to you. Right. In your
Yeah.
dreams, sorry.
Dreams. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Traveling and intense dreams, which I'm sure you also have.
I have had some intense dreams. Sometimes it's just a T-Rex doing like in a conga line. It really depends.
I love it. Love it. Yeah, we
um,
got to be normal too.
yes, yeah. Um, so back to that experience, I want to ask specifically. So when your soul or consciousness, also I love how you said that you were 10 years old, you weren't sure what to call it. And I feel like so many of us had experiences as children that we didn't have the language for it. And maybe that made it seem even, it really showed us how big it was, because when we
Yeah.
grow up and we develop language, you put it in a box. So anyways, that's a whole other story. But as you were saying that, and describing that you were viewing yourself running up the hill, so were you viewing your human body in motion running up
Yeah.
the hill? That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's wow.
Yeah, it was like the lower me and the higher me, and I knew there were two. Like, it was one, I was one, but I can remember still looking out, but also looking down.
So
It's
like a
such a
duo.
strange.
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Just and maybe it was more of an awareness, right? Than a being I wasn't like fully separated from my body, but yeah, just this bird's eye view, like the top of my head, everyone beside me, like looking down at a map. It was pretty cool.
It's so beautiful and so far out. It's incredible. And it's
Yeah.
an experience that I've heard shared in some near death experiences where someone may be in the in between state where they know they're in
Yeah.
their body that is undergoing what it's going through, but it's also above the body. So that's so fascinating. Um,
Hmm.
and how has that experience, um that experience that was so impressed on you as at such a young age, how has that guided your work with other people? Like maybe clients come to you saying, like, I had this out of body experience and I feel scared or I feel nervous. Like, what would you say to a client who feels nervous about an experience like that?
Hmm. I think for me, I've never really had experiences that scared me. I've been really lucky that, maybe because that happened when I was young or because I've just always kind of naturally kept my spiritual sense, that a lot of kids lose it and come back to it. I mean, I did have some teenage years that were tough, but I think that, bringing the sense of comfort that there isn't anything to be afraid of, that spirit can't do anything to hurt us, that there are no negative spirits or bad places or attachments, like that kind of stuff. I think that experience helped me to see the beauty and the peace and the bigness of, this incarnation, this experience we're having. And I felt nothing but love and connection. And so, I can only share from my experiences that when we focus that way, that's what we get. And so that's just how I try to help people that are feeling worried or, unsure about some of the experiences they're having.
Yeah, I heard it described recently. It's like putting like tuning into a certain radio station, and that's what
Yeah.
that I totally agree with what you're saying. I'm going to switch
Yeah.
gears a little bit because I would love to talk about your psychic investigation work and how would you say that that work. Actually, let's backtrack a bit. What goes into that work? What are you usually tasking yourself with doing in that scenario? And then I'm going to ask you like how that energy differs from channeling for a client one-on-one.
hmm So I do work on missing persons cases. I don't enjoy the missing wallet, the lost dog stuff. To me, that's not where my energy is best directed. I love to help with, someone's gone missing, a child or anybody. Cold cases are great too, but current cases, where I can be of the most use is really where I focus. Those are the cases I take most often. And yeah, so just, where are they? Remote viewing, I guess I use a lot in these cases to just kind of zoom out. What do the surroundings look like? Is it cold? Is it dark? Is it hot? Is it dry? Is it wet? Does it feel like a building? Is there metal? Is there brick? Just feeling for elements. And I think that that's, for anyone who's wanting to get into that work, it's about what does the environment feel like. So I'm a very clairsentient reader, and so that's what I rely on a lot for those cases. And it's not always about figuring everything out. It's about trusting in these are the elements that I get, these are the feelings, these are the senses, these are the smells, these are the sights, the sounds. And then hopefully the people who know the case better, the law enforcement or the family, whoever has come to me with the case, can go, oh, I know exactly what that is. And so I think it's really important for psychic investigators, mediums, to know that we're not supposed to really solve the case. We just give our what we get, right? And let the pros do that. I also think that it's super important for us to work on cases that come to us. I would never reach out to a family and say, I know where they are, or, let the case come to you. Be respectful with it and ethical with your abilities and trust that the ones that come to you are the ones that you're supposed to work on. So that's really my way of doing that. Yeah.
That is so fascinating. And how would you say that the energy you expend for that work differs from the energy you expend for like a quote unquote regular mediumship reading or a channeling reading? Yeah, how does that differ? What does that take out of you?
I don't think it's a whole lot different for me. I am a true crime junkie, so I'm comfortable with seeing images of, crime and that kind of thing. There's nothing that I'm afraid to see. And so when I do work on these cases, let's say I'm pretty sure the person is in spirit, and so show me where you are, what happened to you, those things don't scare me. But I think it's not for everybody. It's not for every reader. You have to be comfortable with that. But I think the pressure of doing that work is much higher because you don't want to send somebody on, going east and spending a bunch of money with a search party or, like you don't want to send someone in the wrong direction. And so I think it's very important for me, for anyone working on a missing persons case, to know yourself. You really have to know what is your mind, what are your thoughts, what is the story you are creating. When you see a barrel, let's say, does your mind create a story that fills in that information? So it's a little bit different in that way that you can't ask the person in front of you, hey, do you understand this? You have to know what you're getting, why you're getting it, and where it's coming from, and always go back to those first impressions. So the pressure, it's the pressure that I find is different, not necessarily the way that I receive or the way that I work.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And when you have been either sought after by law enforcement or this work has crossed paths with meeting law enforcement, um, I can only imagine all the different reactions or feelings of comfort like comfort levels that I have in my head maybe a bias about, oh, maybe law enforcement isn't as used to this, although it's been just pretty historic that they've used psychic mediums. It's kind of this
Yeah.
thing that's well known but not known. So what has been your overall experience interacting with law enforcement and how they receive this skill that you offer?
It's mainly been families that I've worked with, to be honest. I I prefer law enforcement, but I haven't had a whole lot. I'm, small town, Ontario, not super open around here, but they've been open, I have had some good interactions. I've actually had some clients that are police officers that are super open. It's amazing that we think they're automatically going to be closed off, but I actually think that police are very intuitive. I think they have to be, right? They're relying on
That
their
makes
own
sense.
intuition to follow leads. And so it's been pretty good. It's been good. But, there's the odd like, oh yeah, sure. Everyone says near water, right? Like that's always the like cliche. Like if I do see water, I'm like, "Oh God, why water?" Because they're gonna like water or the forest. Like of
Like, come on,
course there's
spirit, give me
water.
something different.
Yeah.
Oh,
Give me something like a big sign or, just show me on the map because, you don't want to fall into that because you do get the eye rolls and the jokes there, but whatever. I mean, we're used to that with the lottery number jokes anyways, right? So,
oh yes.
yeah. Yeah. So it's been good. It's been good. I really, it's important though to work with the closest individual to the missing person. Yeah, so I, even if it's just a friend, like I need to have full permission to work on the case. So law enforcement's great, but if it's family or, someone else, I really need to know that I have that full permission to feel comfortable settling into the energy because sometimes people reach out and it's like, we need help. And then you find out that they just saw it on the news and then they can't validate back the information. So
Right.
it doesn't it doesn't really help. And I want to use my energy in the best way that I can. So
And what
yeah.
information do you ask for, or do you tell them not to tell you when you are doing this work? Like, does it sometimes involve psychometry, holding an object that belongs to the person, or yeah, what information is involved that is fed to you or that you prefer not to be fed to you?
Just a photo, usually just a photo with clear eyes, like no sunglasses or no glasses with a glare. I need to see the eyes of the individual, whether it's a missing person or it could be, a known deceased person and we need to know what happened. I can work on cases like that too. And just a first name often. I don't need a last name. Sometimes it helps, but just, yeah, just the photo is what I start with. And then I just say, don't tell me anything. I don't want to know if they're missing. I don't want to know if you know that they've passed. I don't want to know anything. Just give me a photo, first name, and I'll ask for more if I need it.
That's fascinating. And it sounds like such powerful work as well. I'm sure not easy, but sounds
Hmm.
very powerful. Um, Switching gears again, this is one of the reasons that I really wanted to chat with you because something that I'm very, and listeners of my podcast will know that I try to be no bullshit and I don't call people out, but sometimes I feel like I want to about just like some of the fraudulent mediumship that's out there. I think it's important to recognize and to tell people what that looks like. So I heard you sharing about your experience with fraudulent mediumship. It was particularly your story being in Lilydale, which I've always wanted to go to. It's on my list. And I would love to just hear from you. Like, could you tell us about one of those experiences that really stood out to you? I know you've had several, and what it taught you about your role as a medium.
Hmm. Well, to give your listeners a little bit of a background, in a nutshell, because it is a very long story that is over 2 years of my life. But in 2023, I started attending conferences at Lilydale and another conference in Albany, New York, and went to 15 different seances. So traveling out of Ontario into mostly, New York State to attend. dark seances with so-called physical mediums. And during that time, I went from being a complete skeptic, but open to learning about trance mediumship and psychic surgery and spiritual healing, and then to realizing that there are people who are still claiming to do like what the Victorians did in the dark seances, where the medium's in the cabinet restrained to the chair and everyone sings songs and holds hands in complete darkness and asks spirit to materialize physically, so physical mediumship. I realize that there are people out there claiming to be able to do this. And so that's what these seances were. And I went, like I said, from skeptic to believer to wait a second, this is way too good to be true. Oh my God, these people are complete frauds, to catching one particular person who I then came home and exposed over, I think, 8 episodes of my podcast. I was sharing about it as it was unfolding. And during that time, I not only learned how easy it is for even a medium to be scammed into believing extraordinary things. I think, in my defense, I believe that anything is possible when it comes to spirit. And I have had so many beautiful experiences that you cannot explain any other way. So I do think that made me a little bit more open. But what my concern was that there were also people attending these seances who were not mediums, who were grieving people, missing their mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, children, who were going in with hopes to receive a gift, to receive a touch, a message from people who 100% are fraudulent scammers, traveling the world taking money from people. So, like I said, I came home and I exposed this on my podcast. I had many threats from his supporters, and he threatened to sue me, the one individual that I was speaking of specifically. But it did result in obtaining footage of him in the act. And what I learned was that people want to believe so badly that they will ignore facts. They will ignore what they're seeing in front of them. And so that was part of why I did this, was to prevent more people. I wasn't going to try to convince the believers. It was just protecting the vulnerable people and protecting the name of mediumship. So yeah, I learned that there's a lot of ego. I learned that spiritualism has such a deep and an interesting history of fraud and genuine mediums, and a genuine medium also, dipping their toes into fraud. And then, it kind of ruined it for me, to be honest. It kind of ruined the beautiful, the Fox sisters story of how modern mediumship began, because the more I heard from other people who said, oh yeah, I sat with this person, or I knew this person, or I worked with this person, they were a fraud. And it was just like, oh my God, there's so much of it. So it hasn't taken away the beauty of spirit, and it's strengthened my mediumship. I know that. But the ego, the competition, the dishonesty in some of these circles has been really hard to kind of wade through and talk about. But like you said, I'm a truth seeker, and I can't just see it and do nothing. And I know that a lot of people didn't have that ability, and I respect that, but it just happens to be that it must have been my purpose. So I went with it, and I felt like I had no choice.
Well, I say good on you for doing that, because I do think about people who are not mediums and they work hard for their money and they're paying with that money to feel closer to their loved one, only for someone to take advantage of that. And it should be called out. And
Yeah.
I love how you put it, that we want so much to believe, and I feel that way sometimes, and I've done this work only for about 3 or 4 years, but and I fully believe in it, but of course I want to believe in even bigger things that I can't even imagine, because I am human, right? And we're human and we want to feel that closeness. And even as mediums, I mean, every medium's experience is different. Like some mediums feel spirit all the time and some don't feel them all the time, and that may affect like how much closer we want to feel to them. Or I think, I mean, even I have experienced, not to the level that you did at Lilydale, but ego in a medium and treating people who followed them like loyal followers and building a following. And so I say good on you for doing that. I'm sure it was very challenging after you called that person out. But it also just shows how much people are willing to defend a medium. I find that very fascinating. I just got finished watching a bunch of documentaries on cults on Netflix, so that's fresh in my
Same.
mind. And maybe some of these followings don't rise to the level of cult, but it's that ego driven business of mediumship that
Yeah.
some people do,
Yeah.
right? There's one story you told of Hannah McIntyre that has really stuck with me, and I'm going to say right now, no pun intended, because uh, it was somebody's hand that had spit on it, that it felt like spit, and it was the intention was for this hand to feel like plasma-y, right? But when you can you share this? Because I thought yes, it's disgusting, but I thought like the lengths people could go to. So could you share for our listeners who may need a warning that they may gag, but
Yeah.
but please share it.
Okay, okay. So I think we need a little bit of background on what that is. So back to the dark seances, right? Like the Victorians with the cabinet. And so that, traditionally could be just like a sheet across a corner of the room or an actual wooden cabinet, or modern day, there's one of them uses a toilet tent like that you would take camping. So there's a zipper that goes all the way around, and he's inside of that tent in a chair, supposedly zip tied to this chair. And there's a whole process of everyone checking him, patting him down, zip tying him to the chair, and that is to kind of prime the mind of the people in the room that, any phenomena that happens clearly isn't him because he's restrained. And so, he also claims that it's for his protection because, if you've heard of ectoplasm, it's this substance that's exuded from his body and it goes out and fills the room. And that is the energy that spirit they claim to step into to create this phenomena. So one of the things that he claims to be able to do is that this arm will materialize and come, the zipper will open and then this hand will come out, and in different lit conditions, it's usually pitch dark where you can't see a single thing in front of you. And again, that is claimed because the ectoplasm is light sensitive, and if the light comes on, it'll rush back into the medium and it could kill the medium. There's a lot of priming here to get the sitters to behave so that really the magician can play tricks on you in the dark, right? It's easier in the dark to fool people. But sometimes when this hand is coming out, there's either a really low red light or sometimes like a blue LED strip light, different every time. But uh, out comes this hand, and it's claimed that it's slimy because he says it's coated in photoplasm. So he says it's an ectoplasm hand coated in photoplasm. That's why it's slimy. But people are called up to come and touch this hand, and it's supposed to be, here's the story, either your loved one's hand, so like an exact replica of one of your deceased family members or friends. If it's not that, it could be your spirit guide, so it wouldn't be a hand that you necessarily recognize.
That sounds like an easy cop
But
out, but keep going.
yeah, yeah. And so it could be your spirit guide, someone that didn't actually walk the earth with you in this lifetime, but maybe if you're like thinking about them, you might feel it. And if it's not that, the third explanation is it could be one of the medium in the tent. It could be one of his guides. Okay. So we have these three options of whose hand this could be. And, people go up and touch it and it's slimy. So there's some kind of lube or spit or something that he's applying to this hand. And for many people, it's a very moving experience because they've been told this is going to be their loved one. And so, much like the culty stuff that you've been watching, I'm sure you've seen where the mind is very powerful at creating what we've been told, right? Creating these experiences. So that was one of the things that was a dead giveaway to me was like, dude, that's just your hand. Like I've been hanging out with you for 3 days, looking at your hand, and I can hear you moving around in there. I mean, if you listen to my podcast, you'll hear how I actually caught him in the act, but it's just his hand. It's just his hand coming in and out, right? It's not this um, rare materialization. It's just his hand. And so things like that, Juan, that's what I've experienced. And that's what I came home to share about, just to say, look how crazy this is, that people are believing this. But that's how powerful the mind is, and that's how powerful our hopes and our grief and our, just searching for something more to believe that because I get it, because I was there. So,
No, and I don't blame you. If I had experienced that and I went back home, well, I would be infuriated because number one, giving a bad name to mediums. Number two, you're frauding
yeah,
people who really have a lot of hope in this. I will say I will never see KY jelly lubricant the same way again. I'm going to be
I
thinking about
know. I
ectoplasm,
know.
photoplasm. It's so funny, but it's just it's so interesting to me. And as I think we as mediums, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but we get such a bad rap sometimes. We get very challenged because and I think it's healthy to be skeptical. I think this shows that it is healthy to be skeptical. But we already get a negative rap enough. And to do
Mhm.
this, it's just, it don't help at all. Um,
Yeah.
is it, how are you, um, how are you digesting, taking in with social media? There are just so many of us, and maybe I don't know if there's more of us now than there was, let's say, 10 years ago. I mean, I know for myself, my awakening, my big awakening, one of several, but the one that got me to do this work was in 2020. And I think many people, I think in the midst of so much suffering and pain and grief, I think people found this path or rediscovered it. With that said, it seems like there are just so many social media based psychic businesses, mediumship businesses, which is great. But how do you view mediumship on the social public platform now online versus maybe 10 years ago? And like how has your experience informed how you digest the information that's online now that's being put out by so many mediums and how they promote themselves?
hmm I think that we need to be careful how we represent ourselves as mediums on social media. I think we need to put out the raw, as close to raw footage, or if you're sharing a reading, just share the reading. None of this clipping and cutting and making it seem so extraordinary. But there's a lot of that out there. And I think that when you go to book with that person and then it's like, this isn't as extraordinary as I saw. Uh, so I do think that we need to be careful how we represent our work and what we put out there to keep it realistic. There's recent Netflix series that I kind of have been a little bit worked up about as well with a well-known kind of famous medium that it's like, you see the edited version and then you see this live version and it's so different, so different. And I think just show your mediumship. Just be just be you and be real with it and don't glorify, it's so exciting when you get the name or when you get that awesome piece of information. But what I really don't love is switching up the order of our readings to make it look like it went from this to this to this to this, because we all know it doesn't go that way, right? So
I didn't
that's my
even
big
think of that.
thing. Yeah, don't switch
Yeah.
up the order. That's not fair. That's not fair. I will never do that. So things like that, I think is it's becoming very common to, and if you only have a minute and a half or 3 minutes to share a reading, I understand why things have been edited and clipped and cut. But again, if that's the platforms we're working with, then I think we need to be honest with, maybe share the full video somewhere else too, or something like that. I don't know. That's just
Yeah.
my thought.
No, similar to your experience, I've seen two psychic mediums who are known for their TV shows in person, and I love them both very much. But it really, as a psychic medium myself, seeing them live, it really taught me, oh, they also get no's. And I
Yeah.
don't know, and the I don't know what that is responses,
Yeah.
and it was very humbling. It was very eye-opening, and it didn't make me think less of them as mediums. It's like, oh,
No.
this is normal because I would be so hard on myself for getting no's. And so to your point, it's so unfortunate that in the land of TV and social media, we it works in like sound bites and small clips, and TV producers don't want the awkward silence in between two symbols, right? But so I fully agree with you that it's on us as mediums to be as honest as possible about the process and just being human. We're humans with these abilities. I believe we all have the ability, but we're humans who are deciding to use the ability.
Yeah.
Sort of tied to that, what is one misconception about your work that you hear, maybe, I don't know, maybe from first time clients or that just in general, a misconception that you notice about the work you do?
Mm. Yeah. I think for me specifically, it's that I'm always seeing spirit, or that I'm always, I know you mentioned this earlier, that not all of us are always turned on or tapped in that way. I mean, I always am connected to spirit, but I think that it's much more subtle than people, and even some mediums will portray their experience of spirit as so extraordinary and so intense and so vivid. And it's as if they're standing right beside them. And, who am I to say that it isn't like that for them? But I do think, again, TV or social media can definitely make it seem less subtle than it is and more intense. So for me, it's always been about saying, like, hey, listen, this is a subtle experience. Yeah, maybe I can feel really intense emotions or see really intense images, but it's not like the movies. I guess that's a misconception. It's not, yeah, I guess that's all I can say.
Did you grow up with That's So Raven on Disney Channel?
No, no, I know what you're talking about, but no.
I think sometimes people, I don't know if you've seen clips from the show where when she gets a psychic hit, she just goes, and the camera zooms in on her eyes. I
Yes.
think people think we just be like, I'm getting something.
Right.
do
Yeah. And
you
like
do
a
you
cold breeze comes in and the clouds part. And then there's this whole,
the horns are
no.
blazing in the sky and the angels are called?
Yeah.
Yes. Do you get the question when you tell people you're a psychic medium and you do this work, like, oh, what are you getting on me right now? Do you ever
I
get that question?
do. I do. Yeah. Or people just get weirded out, right? I find, like, you're at a party or whatever, or get together. It's like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, here we go again. Okay. So I'm a psychic medium. And then I wait. And then usually there's some kind of like body shift, right? Where they're suddenly uncomfortable and blocking their energy, or like, oh my God, what do you get on me? So it does make for interesting conversation for sure,
Yeah.
as I'm sure you know, but I've been really well supported, and I hope you have too, Juan, because I think it's a good time on the planet to be a medium. We do have the pioneers that have come before us with the spiritualists, but even, the mediums on TV that have paved the way for us to do this work. So I'm thankful that I'm doing it now and not even just 20, 30 years ago, because I think it has become fairly normal, right? Like it's kind of just a thing that people know that people do. So thankful for that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that the good side of social media is that we're all so much more, well, no, I believe we've always been interconnected as a human, as humans, right? On this
Mhm.
planet, on this sunship, which I love that word, by the way, sunship Earth. Um, but I think we've noticed it more because of social media, and that's a good thing, how interconnected we
Mhm.
are. The hope is that it grows people's empathy for each other, although that's it depends these days. But I think what's special about social media is that it does just that. And us as mediums, we can help remind people that what's behind that connection between us, it's a soul connection. We all come from the same place, and we are all one. We really are all one. And so I agree with you. I think this is an interesting time where everything is online, and because of that, people are noticing each other from different
Mhm.
countries and suffering
Mhm.
from different things or rejoicing in different things. And I always think about the beauty of how New Year's Eve, you can see on video New Year's Eve in Dubai, New Year's Eve, New Year's Eve in Africa, New Year's Eve in New York, and it's incredible. And we really
Yeah.
take it for granted, and it gives us an opportunity. So thank you for saying that. I think
Yeah.
that's a wonderful way to look at it. Um, what would you say to someone who is just starting out on their journey? They just either discovered or rediscovered their abilities as a medium, and they're like, what do I do? What would you say to them?
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I think that what's really important in those early beginner stages where you're just, just opening up to focus on just you and spirit and let spirit guide that process. I think a lot of people are really unsure of what do I do? How do I work with this? And they get really excited as they should, but then jump to a teacher and a mentorship and a program and all these different resources, which even just in the last 10 years has exploded, with social media, like you were saying. When I was starting out, I feel like there wasn't as much. It was hard to find an online group or a Facebook group. It wasn't as big, but I knew right away for me, what was important was that I didn't have someone else's voice in my head telling me about my mediumship. I've always felt very strongly that my mediumship is mine. It's mine. It's my connection with spirit, and it's something that I share with spirit, and I don't want it to be funneled into someone else's version of their mediumship, or I don't want someone else's voice in my head. Now, that's not to say I don't take advice from podcasts and people who have come before me, right? But I've always had this rule with myself that, okay, that's their experience. That's how their mediumship works. I'm going to consider that. Noted. All right, got it. Try to put myself in their shoes. Is that how it works for me or not? And if it is, great. If it isn't, okay, spirit, show me how that works for me. Let spirit be your guide. And, later, if you do want to take courses or whatever, great. Like, there's no reason you shouldn't. But in the very beginning, I think that's important to just have that slow kind of, what is this? How does this work for me? And trusting in your experiences. Because yeah, I think spirit is the best teacher.
And because we are all already connected to spirit.
Hmm.
At least I believe that it's not about trying to reach for spirit. It's there. It's just about us being
Yeah.
aware of it, right?
Yeah.
And yes, that there. I personally believe the best kind of mentor or teacher is someone who's going to tap into your unique potential, not create a carbon copy of themselves, right? I've
Yes.
definitely experienced both types of mentors, teachers,
Right.
and who were wonderful, both wonderful, but yeah, that is very important because we are already connected. We could learn from spirit, from the
Hmm.
signs and our journey. Well, tell listeners where they can find out more about you and hear your podcasts.
Yeah, so my solo podcast is called Spirit Call. It's on all the platforms. My co-hosted podcast is Third Eye Witness. That's more of a YouTube channel because it's got video aspect to it where we can share photos of the person that we're investigating, that kind of thing. So go check that out. And I'm on all the platforms, psychic medium Jeni Juranics, and my website is the only place to book with me, jenijuranics.com. I'm sure you've had impersonators on social media copying your accounts, so always look for the blue check mark. I say this every time because it's amazing how often that pops up. So yeah.
Speaking of
That's,
frauds, right?
yeah, exactly.
Well,
Frustrating, but
Jeni, thank you so much for your time. I really loved our conversation. It was so fun to talk to you, and it was very so many insights I think listeners will take away. So thank you.
thank you so much for having me.
Follow the podcast and please leave a review. If you want me to talk about a specific subject on the podcast or you have a question for the podcast, go to juanfranciscospirit.com and go to my contact page and submit that question.